السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. الصلاة والسلام على رسوله الكريم وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا. So we're continuing in our study of Kitab al-Iman. We're actually almost at the end of it, which is pretty amazing. SubhanAllah, that means it's been over a year doing Kitab al-Iman, the book of faith of Sahih al-Bukhari. So congratulations to those of you that have attended all of them, or the vast majority of them, inshallah ta'ala. This gives you hopefully a very well-rounded view of Iman. It gives you the theological basis of your religion, as well as obviously a methodology in how to study hadith for the most part. So last week, what did we cover? You guys should remember. What's that? So to raise the voices in the masajid. We talked about raising voices in the masajid. And why did al-Bukhari rahimahullah include that hadith in Kitab al-Iman, in the book of faith?
Because it could lead to deprivation.
It could lead to deprivation in the sense of sin? In the sense of reward. So deprivation of reward. Should I stop looking at you? Yes. Okay. So it could lead to deprivation. خوف المؤمن أن يحبط عمله وهو لا يشعر. The chapter was the fear of the believer that his actions would be voided without him paying attention. So the next hadith, actually, the next chapter, I'm just going to glance over it because it's a repeated, we've already gone over hadith Jibreel, but I want to just mention the way that he introduces hadith Jibreel, then we'll go to the hadith that we're going to spend some time with, inshallah ta'ala. So the next chapter, which is chapter 37, is Bab Su'ali Jibreel al-Nabiy sallallahu alayhi wa sallam an al-Iman wal-Islam wal-Ihsan wa ilm al-Sa'a. So it's the chapter of Jibreel alayhi salam, the angel Gabriel, asking the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam about Iman, which is faith, Islam, which is the religion, and Ihsan, which is excellence and worship, and the knowledge of the hour. And then he continues on. And so we already covered this hadith, so I'm not going to cover the hadith. I'm just going to mention why it's placed here, inshallah, the context of why it's placed here. And then we'll go on to the next one. He says, وَبَيَانِ النَّبِيِّ صَلَى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمَ لَهُ ثُمَّ قَالَ جَاءَ جِبْرِيلُ عَلَيْهِ السَّلَامُ يُعَلِّمُكُمْ دِينَكُمْ. He said, and the way that the Prophet ﷺ explained or answered his questions, and the Prophet ﷺ saying that Jibreel came to you to teach you your deen. Now, the reason why he says Jibreel came to teach you your deen, he says, فَجَعِلَ ذَلِكَ كُلَّهُ دِينًا. He said that the Prophet ﷺ included the entire discussion with Jibreel alayhi salam, everything Jibreel taught, as a fundamental part of our religion. Now, why is this important? Why is al-Bukhari putting this here? Because this hadith mentions the internal beliefs, so arkan al-Iman, the foundations of faith, the pillars of faith, belief in Allah, belief in the angels, belief in the messages, belief in the messengers, belief in the Day of Judgment, and belief in divine decree. He mentions the internal aspects of faith. He mentions the external aspects of faith in our testimony of faith, in our prayer, in our paying zakat, in our fasting Ramadan, in our doing Hajj. And then he mentions the way that the believer strives to perfect both of those things. So ihsan, which is excellence, to worship Allah as if you can see Him. And if you can't see Him, فَإِنَّهُ يَرَاكَ, then you know that He sees you, is the believer trying to perfect, trying to elevate both his internal state of belief and his external application of that belief to a point where he worships Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as if he sees Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is perfection in faith. So the Prophet ﷺ establishes with Jibreel alayhi salam, as the companions are listening, the internal aspects of faith, the external aspects of faith, and essentially that the pursuit of the believer in elevating their internal aspects of faith with the outward manifestation to perfection never ends. Okay? And so al-Bukhari rahimahullah says, جَاءَ جِبْرِيلُ عَلَيْهِ السَّلَامُ يُعَلِّمُكُمْ دِينَكُمْ. The Prophet ﷺ said, Jibreel came to teach you your entire religion. فَجَعِلَ ذَلِكَ كُلَّهُ دِينًا. So the Prophet ﷺ considered all of that to be part of your religion, which refutes all the deviant groups of the time. Because either a deviant group has a deficiency in the way that it views the internal aspects of faith, or the way it views the outward aspects of faith. He says, وَمَا بَيَّنَ النَّبِيُّ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمَ لِوَفْدِ عَبْدِ الْقَيْسِ مِنَ الْإِيمَانِ. And he said, and how the Prophet ﷺ demonstrated Iman, faith, to لِوَفْدِ عَبْدِ الْقَيْسِ. Just hadith language for those that take notes and that are paying like really close attention. What is a wafd? A wafd is not a group. What is a wafd? Can be a group. A wafd is a delegation, wufud, wafid, someone that came to meet the Prophet ﷺ to learn the religion, to go back and teach the religion to their people. Okay, so Aam al-Wufud, which was the 9th year after Hijrah, the year of delegations, is when the people, the different tribes, the various tribes sent their delegations to the Prophet ﷺ to learn the religion properly and go back and teach them. So generally, when you see wafd, that someone is described as a wafd, it means either a person or a tribe that came to meet the Prophet ﷺ to learn the religion. So Bukhari rahimahullah ta'ala says, and the way the Prophet ﷺ taught Iman to Wafd Abdul Qais. Why? Because it's a detailed narration, and basically the Prophet ﷺ taught Abdul Qais what Jibreel alayhi salam taught him. Okay? Or what he taught Jibreel alayhi salam, or what was made apparent to the Sahaba in that context. So he taught that group the same principles of faith, and he considered it all part of Iman. He says, وَقَوْلِهِ تَعَالَى وَمَنْ يَبْتَغِي غَيْرَ الْإِسْلَامِ دِينًا فَلَنْ يُقْبَلَ مِنْهُ. And the saying of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that whoever pursues other than Islam as a religion, then it would not be accepted from him as a deen. So he basically introduces it in this context. So he's just repeating this hadith, he's restating this hadith in a different narration, because this incident of Jibreel alayhi salam coming to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and having this conversation with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was in the presence of a large group of companions. So it's narrated over 40 times, okay, by different companions that witnessed that discussion between the Prophet, peace be upon him, and Jibreel alayhi salam, and the angel Gabriel. So this is the narration of Abu Hurairah radiallahu ta'ala anhu, and what makes this narration significant as opposed to the other narration from Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhu, which is the shortest and most concise and the most authentic one that's used, is that in the end of this narration, Abu Abdullah, it says at the end of the narration, قال أبو عبد الله جعل ذلك كله من الإيمان. The Prophet ﷺ included everything that was taught by Jibreel alayhi salam as a part of Iman, as a part of faith. So to show that Iman consists of the belief in the heart, that which is spoken, and the actions that confirm the tongue and confirm the heart. That faith comprises of these three essential components. Al-qalb, wal-lisan, wal-amal. Okay? Faith in the heart, correct belief in the heart, a tongue that testifies to that faith, and actions that confirm that which has been stated and that which is in the heart. Now the hadith that we're going to discuss is the next hadith. Okay? So the hadith says, حدثنا إبراهيم بن حمزة قال حدثنا إبراهيم بن سعد عن صالح عن ابن شهاب. Who is Ibn Shihab? An Imam al-Zuhri rahimahullah ta'ala. So Ibn Shihab is someone that al-Bukhari rahimahullah quotes frequently. Ibn Shihab is an Imam al-Zuhri, the first person in the history of Islam to be given the official job of collecting hadiths by Umar ibn Abdul Aziz rahimahullah ta'ala. So he says, حدثنا Ibn Shihab قال عبيد الله ابن عبد الله أن عبد الله بن Abbas. So Ubaydullah, the son of Abdullah, narrates from Abdullah bin Abbas, أخبره, he said to him, قال أخبرني أبو سفيان. So the narration is from Ibn Abbas. He says, أخبرني أبو سفيان. Abu Sufyan told me. Now, just as a side note here, Ibn Abbas radiallahu ta'ala anhu, who accepted Islam as a child, who spent the last 3 years of the Prophet's life with him, and who used to go to the companions and ask them questions directly. Ibn Abbas was famous for sleeping on their doorsteps and getting all of the information from them. What happened? What did you say? So on and so forth. So when he says, أخبرني Abu Sufyan told me, what that means is, he went and he sat with Abu Sufyan and he asked Abu Sufyan to tell him about his encounters with the Prophet ﷺ. So it's like a personal conversation between him and Abu Sufyan. Okay? So this is either after the Prophet ﷺ passed away, which is most likely, or this is or this is actually, at the very end of the Prophet's life. So this isn't necessarily a hadith because it's Ibn Abbas narrating something that happened with Abu Sufyan. Okay? He said, أخبرني أبو سفيان أن هرقل. Okay? Hiraql is Heracles of Rome. Heracles of Rome. If you guys remember in the first book of Bukhari, those of you that have studied with us, the first book of Bukhari, which was the beginning of Revelation, we covered the incident in which Abu Sufyan was with a group of his companions as a non-Muslim, and Heracles summoned him of Rome because Heracles received the letter of the Prophet ﷺ inviting him to Islam. So he summoned Abu Sufyan, knowing that Abu Sufyan is from Mecca and he knows the Prophet ﷺ, and he summoned the people of Mecca that were there on their trade route to ask them what they knew about the Prophet ﷺ. So it's a very long incident that took place, and it's cut up into the questions are cut up into various narrations because it was a long dialogue between Hiraql, all of these different questions. So in this particular question, actually let me give you some more context. Does anyone know when this incident took place? Does anyone remember when Abu Sufyan went to Jerusalem and met the leader of Rome? Right after Sulh Hudaybiyah. How do we know that?
Because Abu Sufyan responds to one of his questions, we're in a sulh with him right now and we don't know what he's going to do.
Okay, so the first one, which is obvious, is that Abu Sufyan actually explicitly mentions to Hiraql in this conversation, to Heraclius in this conversation, that we are in a treaty with the Prophet ﷺ. We're in a treaty with Muhammad ﷺ. What else? Just a matter of Islamic history, the Prophet ﷺ wrote letters inviting people to Islam in two phases of his life. Bidayat Mecca, so Bidayat al-Wahy, which is the beginning of his call. And he really wrote to leaders around the world. For the most part, really, we can only really confirm he wrote to Najashi in Abyssinia. That was to seek help, as well as obviously solicit his becoming a believer and so on and so forth, but a place where the Muslims could escape. But the Prophet ﷺ sent out all of his letters to the leaders around the world, inviting them to Islam after the Treaty of Hudaybiyah, because that gave him a chance to focus on his da'wah. It gave him a chance to focus on his call. So that means it's after the 7th year, after Hijrah. So we're talking about the last 2 years of the Prophet ﷺ's life. So Abu Sufyan has been in bitter conflict with the Prophet ﷺ for a very long time. They've been through a lot at this point. And the Prophet ﷺ sends this. We also know that it's before Abu Sufyan became Muslim, because Abu Sufyan states in this narration that he wasn't Muslim yet, making it before the conquest of Mecca. Because by the time Fatih Mecca came around, the conquest of Mecca came around, Abu Sufyan had become a Muslim at that point. So this incident is taking place in the very end of the Prophet ﷺ's life. Now, why is this important? That means that Islam has spread now at this point, that the religion is complete, okay? That it's already got all of its functional aspects to it, its external practices and so on and so forth. It's not Mecca when the religion was really just a theology and a creed and a belief system, as opposed to the external practices. It's a codified, complete religion with a solid, stable set of followers that have been through all types of things over 2 decades. Muhajirin, Ansar, the people of Mecca, the people of Medina, people of different tribes. It's starting to become somewhat universal because people are starting to accept the religion from outside. So by the time Heraclius is asking Abu Sufyan about these questions, Islam has a track record. Okay? Islam has a track record. It's got 2 decades of a track record. So there are identifiable qualities of the religion. All right? So this was about the 8th year after Hijrah, the last 2 years of the Prophet ﷺ's life. And Abu Sufyan was in charge of the trade routes of Quraysh. So Abu Sufyan used to lead the trade routes, lead the caravans to Yemen and Syria. And Syria, obviously, at that time, Sham means this entire area. So this is the 8th year. Abu Sufyan's having a conversation with him. So Abu Sufyan said to Ibn Abbas, radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he said, Heraclius of Rome, he said to me after all of these questions, all of these dialogues, he said, this is so beautiful, قَالَ سَأَلْتُكَ هَلْ يَزِيدُونَ أَمْ يَنْقُصُونَ. He said, I asked you about these Muslims, I asked you about the followers of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, if they were increasing or are they decreasing? Now Abu Sufyan couldn't lie, because if he lied, despite the persecution that they faced, despite the boycotting, despite being run out of their land at this point, despite having faced all sorts of trauma and all sorts of persecution, they're still increasing. So he says, سَأَلْتُكَ هَلْ يَزِيدُونَ أَمْ يَنْقُصُونَ? I asked you, are they growing or are they shrinking in number? فَزَعَمْتَ أَنَّهُمْ يَزِيدُونَ. And you said they're still increasing. So you insisted that they're actually still increasing. He says, وَكَذَلِكَ الْإِيمَانُ. It is complete in all of its respects. Meaning what? That this is a sign of a true religion. This is a sign of a religion that's worth something. A religion that actually means something. That despite the persecution, despite the very difficult circumstances that they faced, it still increased at this rate. That people still accepted into Islam. And then listen to what he says. He says, وَسَأَلْتُكَ هَلْ يَرْتَدُّ أَحَدٌ سَخْطَةً لِدِينِهِ بَعْدَ أَنْ يَدْخُلَ فِيهِ. He said, I asked you, does anyone leave this religion? Does anyone leave this religion after having embraced it because they were displeased with it? Do you see people leaving Islam because they have a problem with Islam, because they are displeased with it? So he says, فَزَعَمْتَ أَنْ لَا. And you told me, honestly, they're not leaving. I mean, everything that we put them through, it's not just that they're growing. You know, right now you could describe the da'wah in North America as it's growing in one aspect and it's shrinking in the sense that there are a lot of people that are leaving the religion. So it's growing and it's growing overall, but there is a lot of leakage there, right? So basically, Herakl is saying, I asked you, is there a leakage here? You know, are people leaving the religion as it's increasing? And you told me that's not the case. He says, وَكَذَلِكَ الْإِيمَانُ حِينَ تُخَالِطُ بَشَاشَتُهُ الْقَلْبِ لَا يَسْخَطُهُ أَحَدٌ. He said that's how Iman is when it enters into a person's heart and it mixes into that person's heart. You know, بَشَاشَتُهُ الْقَلْبِ, which would mean like it actually becomes incorporated in the person's heart. He said that once that delight is there, once a person has the delight of faith in their heart, لَا يَسْخَطُهُ أَحَدٌ. No one will leave it out of displeasure. SubhanAllah, it's a beautiful hadith. Beautiful narration. So the idea here, number one, that Islam, despite the persecution, despite what these people were put through, the conversion rate only grew. The more you put these people through, the more they grew. The more you slandered the Prophet ﷺ, the more people still found a way to find out about what his true character was, and they continued to increase. And that's a sign of the greatness of the character of the Messenger ﷺ, and a sign of the greatness of the religion, a greatness of the faith. That despite, even today, despite all the Islamophobia, despite everything that's against it, it is still the fastest growing religion in the world. And it's still the fastest growing religion in America. Okay? So despite all of that, it's still growing. And he says that's a sign of faith. I know faith. I know what this means for this religion. That means it's a religion of quality. You know, it's persevered over these decades of intense suppression, and it still made its way through. And then I asked you, are people leaving the religion? Because if people are coming in, and then they're getting disillusioned, but the percentage of those that are coming in and getting disillusioned are less than the percentage of those that are entering for the first time, it really doesn't say much about the religion. It just means that it's appealing at surface level. So the first one, is it appealing at surface level? The second one, once people actually come into it, are they satisfied or are they dissatisfied? Right? And realize here that Herakl is talking about faith entering the heart of a person. Meaning a person really adopted the religion, practiced it, learned it, right? It became part and parcel of their life. At that point, does anyone experience the joy of true faith and then let it go? Right? And subhanAllah, it's really a powerful question, and it shows you the intelligence of Herakl, honestly. It shows you his intelligence. When someone gets it into their heart, meaning, I'm not asking you about people that came into Islam for a day or two and then said, you know, the persecution is not worth it. Because there were people like that. There were people that converted to Islam and then left after a day or two, decided that it's not, the persecution is too much. And I'll talk about those people. But I'm talking about someone who immersed themselves in the faith. Do they ever leave the religion out of displeasure with the religion? So meaning, it's not that they came in and they were disillusioned by the Muslims, or they were disillusioned by the way they were being treated, they actually had an issue with the faith itself after immersing themselves into it. And Abu Sufyan said, I have to be honest, it's not just surface level. When people actually get into it, there's no way of beating it out of them. The more we subject them to persecution, the more firm they become on their religion, and we cannot get them to leave it. So it's not just growing. We can't get them to leave once they get into it. It's beautiful. And he says that that's what happens with true faith. Now, realize here, he's talking to Abu Sufyan. Abu Sufyan here is now a Muslim. He's narrating this as a Muslim. And Abu Sufyan is telling Ibn Abbas, the scholar of the Ummah, about his experience. Right? Now, Abu Sufyan, as a non-Muslim, okay, and Quraysh as a whole, as non-Muslims, they did not understand what it meant to have true faith in something, because they weren't religious people. Okay? If you think about it, their religion, what they had, was just a bunch of, scattered paganism. Right? They worshipped idols. They didn't have a set rule of rituals. They were really governed by tribal norms, not necessarily by anything that was faith-based. So they held the Kaaba in high regard. They had the idols and all that type of stuff, but they didn't even believe in a hereafter. They didn't really have anything that was truly, giving them any sort of attachment to their faith. So they had no attachment to their faith. They didn't really even have a faith. There was no identifiable religion. Like, they weren't called the religion of Jahiliyyah. They didn't have a deen. They were a people of no religion. So they were agnostic paganists in some way. I mean, they were all over the place. Agnostic pagans, right? So they didn't get why a person would make sacrifices for a religion. Like, that whole concept was foreign to them. Like, why would you suffer so much? Oh, I get why you're being religious. You want money. You want power. You're just trying to take over, you're just trying to give your tribe superiority over the other tribes, because that's the way they used to function. If you were hospitable back then, it was because you wanted to give your tribe the upper hand over another tribe. That's how they understood it. You were trying to make money, you were trying to get your tribe up there. They did not get the concept of actually entering into a religion and actually having an attachment to faith in a way that you would be willing to suffer in the material sense for the sake of that faith. It did not register with them, which is why with the Prophet ﷺ, they thought that torture would be an effective mechanism, but it was actually counterproductive. زَادَتْهُمْ إِيمَانًا. It only increased the believers in faith because it made them realize how much more worth it was. And that's really what it is. When you struggle for something, you realize that you love it. You realize how precious it is when someone's trying to take it away from you. So the torture method was quite counterproductive. Right? But they thought if we torture them enough, they'll come forward, they'll give it up, because that's how this works. So we'll make them suffer in regards to their tribes, we'll put their tribes down, right? There was a tribalistic reason for boycotting Banu Hashim in particular. Okay? Abu Jahl, who instigates the boycott, hated Banu Hashim. Alright? He had an issue with Banu Hashim. He was from Banu Makhzum was a rival tribe to Banu Hashim. And that was his problem with the Prophet ﷺ. That's what registered to Abu Jahl. He didn't care what the Prophet ﷺ was saying. He's from Banu Hashim, I'm from Banu Makhzum. So now that he could use the religious, this is going to sound like election year in Mecca, okay? He could use the paranoia about Islam that was there in Meccan society to do what he really wanted to do, which was to humiliate Banu Hashim. He did it, right? It gave him, it validated his racism. Okay, we'll pick that back up, inshallah. So it actually validated his racism, okay, and it allowed him to torture Banu Hashim in the way that he actually wanted to. All right. So this is the way these people thought, and that's why when it came to the Prophet ﷺ, even the Prophet ﷺ, they knew he was an honest man. They loved the Prophet ﷺ. They knew that he was a noble man. They go to the Prophet ﷺ and they say to the Prophet ﷺ, "Listen, you want women, right? We can give you women. Okay? You want money? We've got you covered. You want to lead Mecca? Like, you want to be in charge of this place? We will make you our leader. You want the keys to the Kaaba? We'll give you the keys to the Kaaba." They weren't saying that out of mockery. They were saying that like, okay, we get it. All right? We know how this works. This religion business works. We've been doing it very successfully with the Kaaba for all these years. We know how the religion business works. What do you want? What's your maslahah? What are you seeking in dunya? What is your dunyawi benefit? Your worldly benefit that you want out of this supposed religion. So when the Prophet ﷺ makes statements like, even if you put the sun in my right hand and the moon in my left, I wouldn't give up, I would not renounce this religion until Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grants me victory in it, or I die in the process of that, or even if you were to be able to strike a flame from the sun, it's not going to allow me to renounce it. That just didn't register for them. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what does He say in the Quran? He says, وَدُّوا لَوْ تُدْهِنُوا فَيُدْهِنُونَ. They want you to compromise on your religion. They will happily compromise on theirs. So they don't really care about their set of beliefs. They just want to get you away from yours. So, we'll worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala every single day of the year. We don't really care about our religion. We'll worship Allah every single day of the year. But just worship the idols for one day. They didn't want to give up the masalih, the dunya masalih, the worldly benefits of their religion, that it was serving them. Okay? So they didn't care. We'll worship Allah. We'll put our heads on the ground. We'll do whatever you want. Sajda that piece of cake. You want us to fast? That's all fine. But you have to validate our system too. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَدُّوا لَوْ تُدْهِنُوا فَيُدْهِنُونَ. And you know what's amazing about وَدُّوا لَوْ تُدْهِنُوا فَيُدْهِنُونَ? They wish that you would compromise. They will happily compromise on their faith. This is one of the earliest surahs in the Quran. One of the first verses revealed in the Quran was وَدُّوا لَوْ تُدْهِنُوا, Surah Noon, Al-Qalam. وَدُّوا لَوْ تُدْهِنُوا فَيُدْهِنُونَ. They just want you to compromise. They will happily compromise. Like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala basically read them perfectly. That's before they made the offer of, we'll worship your God for this many days and you worship. That's when it was really just getting started. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, watch how these people act. Watch how quickly they will give up aspects of their religion so that you can give up your religion. And that's exactly what they did. Every single year, Quraysh was willing to give up a little bit more if that meant ending Islam. Because the idea of a faith that's fulfilling enough to not only not benefit in the worldly sense, but to actually suffer in the worldly sense was completely foreign to these people. So Abu Sufyan didn't get it. Quraysh did not understand. And so that's what faith is. What's the idea here? We torture these people, we persecute them, we show them this, we do this to them, we kick them out, and they still want to be part of it? It doesn't make sense to us. It doesn't make sense to us. And I'll just give you one more thing that I'll move on, inshallah ta'ala. To understand, primarily, the main goal amongst the Arab, because Sheikh Yasser's actually discussed it last night in the Khatira as well, it was really about lineage for them. So Banu Amr ibn Sa'sa'a, they actually said to the Prophet ﷺ, Banu Amr ibn Sa'sa'a, they said, look, we'll accept you because we see potential in you to take over the Arab world and to really spread this religion. We'll accept you, but on the condition that once you get victory, you hand it over to us. We'll inherit the kingdom after you. And the Prophet ﷺ says, الْأَرْضُ لِلَّهِ يُرِثُهَا مَنْ يَشَاءُ وَالْعَاقِبَةُ لِلْمُتَّقِينَ. The earth belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives it to whom He wills, and true victory belongs to the believers. So no, I'm not going to make that type of compromise with you. That's all they cared about, was superiority of lineage, superiority of tribe. They did not get this concept of faith being that meaningful. So the idea was, no matter how much they tortured them, it still grew. The call was still appealing. So surface level, it was appealing. It drew people to the religion. And then once people were in the religion, they were not displeased with it. Now here's the thing. Did people leave the religion of Islam? Were there murtadeen at the time? Are there murtadeen today? Are there people that leave the religion today? Yes, granted, it's a much, much, much smaller rate. It's far less than people that leave other religions, but Islam has a better retention rate than most faith traditions in the world. It does have a pretty strong retention rate, but there are people that do leave the religion. Okay, so the question is, doesn't that contradict this hadith? Doesn't this contradict this concept, this notion? Does it or does it not? Why not? Because he says that a person leaves out of displeasure with the religion itself. They immersed themselves in it, they allowed it to enter their heart, and then they left. And this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, ضَرَبَ اللَّهُ مَثَلًا subhanallah كَلِمَةً طَيِّبَةً كَشَجَرَةٍ طَيِّبَةٍ أَصْلُهَا ثَابِتٌ وَفَرْعُهَا فِي السَّمَاءِ تُؤْتِي أُكُلَهَا كُلَّ حِينٍ بِإِذْنِ رَبِّهَا. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says the example of the tree of belief of La ilaha illallah is like a tree with firm foundations in the heart. أَصْلُهَا ثَابِتٌ وَفَرْعُهَا فِي السَّمَاءِ. The foundations are very, very, very firm, and the branches are high in the sky. So then why would people, that's in Surah Ibrahim, why would people leave the religion though? Why would people leave the religion? So we see a few of them. And the scholars of Hadith and the Quran, they speak about this. So one of them is out of ignorance, out of jahl. They never really understood it. So the problem was that the aql, their intellect, did not grasp the religion properly. or they did not have it growing up. They did not really understand the religion properly. So when they were challenged intellectually, they had a faith crisis because they didn't know the answers to those questions. You know, your whole life was very nice and simple. Even if you grew up as a Muslim, you grew up in Sunday school, you know, religion was very, very simple. But then you started getting these complex challenges to your faith, and you've never heard all this stuff before. And if you ask your parents questions growing up, they said, shh, astaghfirullah, say a'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajeem. How are you going to face this intellectual crisis now when people challenge your faith with very serious challenges and you don't know how to answer? Because it's not just the Islamophobe that doesn't know the context of that hadith or the context of that incident. You don't know the context of that hadith or the context of that incident. And even if you go and find it out, if you're bombarded by that 10, 15, 20, 30 times, and basically every time you're scrapping for an answer, you're going to start to question your faith. Because you weren't intellectually armed, right, to be able to defend it. I shouldn't use the word armed, it's a bad word now. Okay? But you weren't intellectually capable of being able to defend it organically. Because you did not grow with that ilm, with that knowledge. And so for the behind the scenes students, إِنَّمَا يَخْشَى اللَّهَ مِنْ عِبَادِهِ الْعُلَمَاء. The goal of knowledge is to produce awe of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. إِنَّمَا يَخْشَى اللَّهَ مِنْ عِبَادِهِ الْعُلَمَاء. Those who truly are in awe of Allah are those who have knowledge. Why? Because the more you know about the religion, it's an intellectual faith, the more confident you feel in it. And the more confident you feel in it, the easier it is to practice it. The more you start believing in your dua, right? The more you start believing in your salah, the more you start actually believing in your spirituality, because as you're intellectually satisfied, realize Ibrahim alayhi salam said, لِيَطْمَئِنَّ قَلْبِي. Oh Allah, do this for me. Let me go through this experiment so that my heart can be placed to ease, not so that my brain can be further convinced. Because the natural effect, what Ibrahim was seeking, was that as the aql, as the brain, as the intellect is more satisfied, the heart is put at ease, and you find it far easier to practice. And you believe in your dua, you believe in your tawbah, you believe more in the akhirah, you believe in these concepts. It's not like, I wonder if this dua really works. I'm going to do it. Because if Allah is out there, it's not going to hurt. You know He's there. And you know this is the way to call Him. Right? So it produces a confidence that makes practice of the faith far easier and more beneficial. So some people leave out of intellectual crisis. Okay? They did not possess the ilm to be able to defend themselves against the shubuhat of the religion and so on and so forth. Some leave when the religion was embraced for a dunya maslaha, for a worldly benefit. This is going to sound very interesting, but you know what? It's very 21st century. Okay? People embrace religions or spirituality because they want satisfaction from it now. How can you make me feel better about what I'm going through now? What's the dua I can say right now, right, to get myself out of this situation? You know, religion in the 21st century is really for, you know, it's narcissism in a way. It's, all right, what can the religion do for me now? It's not what can the religion do for me in the hereafter. It's what du'as do I make now? What salahs do I make now? What do I do here? What do I do there? And that's not something exclusive to Islam. The goal of pursuit of religion is to find a benefit in this world as opposed to the hereafter. So it's not about what Allah wants, it's about what you want. It's not about what God wants, it's about what you want. And it's not about your eternal destination. It's about your present crisis and your present circumstance and how to get out of that. Now, granted that it's good to make dua for your dunya hardships, it's good to seek Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's help when you find worldly hardship and things of that sort. But that's not the goal of your religion. That's not why you're a Muslim. So is there an ayah in the Quran that talks about people like that? Does anyone know? Barakallah feek. Very good. وَمِنَ النَّاسِ مَنْ يَعْبُدُ اللَّهَ عَلَى حَرْفٍ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says there are some people that worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on an edge. If they're pleased, they stay. If good comes to them, they stay. If bad comes to them, they jump off the cliff. And Ibn Abbas radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he literally says, what happened is, there were some people that came and embraced Islam towards al-Wufud, towards the end of the Prophet's life, some delegations, they came and embraced Islam. And they went back, and after they embraced Islam, you know, my wife had a miscarriage. I lost my job. I started to get ridiculed and mocked by my family. Wait a minute, what kind of religion is this? This isn't making me happier. This isn't benefiting me. I want benefit. I want something out of this, and it's not giving me that. So these people quickly jump ship. All right? Because it did not translate into immediate dunya gratification. Right? And if religion does not give you immediate worldly gratification and you don't really, really believe in it, it hasn't really entered into your heart for the sake of it being a true religion and a way or a way of faith that you can pursue Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then you will leave it when it doesn't give you that gratification. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions that. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions insincerity in the beginning, hypocrisy. Okay? The hypocrites. You know, when they're with the believers, inna ma'akum, we're with you, وَإِذَا خَلَوْا إِلَى شَيَاطِينِهِمْ. When they go to their shayateen, when they go to their devils, their allies, and so on and so forth, they say, we're just making fun of them, we're just mocking them, we're not really believers, we're not really Muslims. So they never actually fully came in. Okay? So if you never actually fully came in, then you were insincere to start with. And one of the lastly that I'll mention here, that some of the scholars mention, they leave the religion because they've never experienced living in ignorance. Now, what does that actually mean? People come to Islam, people come to faith after having lived lives of absolute darkness and pursuing all of their desires and doing whatever they wanted to do, right? And they give that all up for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they come into, they embrace faith with all of its restrictions and all of its conditions and everything like that. Whereas someone grows up entitled and privileged and, you know, grew up in a Muslim household and had life handed to them. They never had to work a day in their lives. They never learned any sense of responsibility. They never knew what it meant to really go through serious hardship. Okay? Their idea of a hardship was that their dad bought them a Camry instead of a BMW. You know? They've never really experienced hardship in life. They've never really experienced what it was like to live far away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and you know, just a really harsh life and a dark life where you try to fulfill yourself, where you try to fill that void in your heart with drugs and with you know, all sorts of zina and adultery and fornication and clubbing and whatever it is. They've never been there. So they think that that life is probably not that bad because it seems really glamorous, right? I mean, when's the last time, well, I was going to say when's the last time you saw a rap video where the rapper looked unhappy, but I shouldn't say when's the last time you saw a rap video in the first place. But, you know, when's the last time, you know, if you see a music video or a commercial and they're consuming a product or doing something haram, they're all pretty happy and excited, and it's like, check out our lifestyle, I bet you wish you had this life. And it seems all great on the outside, but on the inside, it's jahim al-ghurur, it's the hell of being deluded in regards to your purpose in life, and being obstructed from faith, and being away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is why Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he says that the religion will leave the Muslims, that Muslims will start to give up the religion إِذْ نَشَأَ فِي الْإِسْلَامِ مَنْ لَا يَعْرِفُ الْجَاهِلِيَّةِ. He said when people grow up in Islam without knowing what it was like to be in ignorance. SubhanAllah. They don't know what it was like to be away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and to be living a life of ignorance and to be living that life of darkness and to be living a life of no purpose and not knowing who you are. Like Umar radiallahu anhu, right? A person that used to drink his problems away, an alcoholic, you know? That fully embraced the Jahiliyyah culture before Islam. He says the problem's going to come when you have these Muslims that grow up, that never had to struggle for their faith, that never lived a life of darkness, that didn't know what it was like before they came to faith. Now, so you see Muslims leaving the faith and things of that sort. It's really, really, really interesting. Let me tell you why. Because the Muslims that tend to leave, I'm just going to talk about our American Muslim dynamics for a moment here, inshallah. The Muslims that tend to leave the faith in very privileged circumstances, right? Whereas Muslims that are persecuted, young people that are persecuted for being Muslims and have gone through all types of things and really, really had to suffer for their faith, they stick with it. And it's the most precious thing in the world to them. Okay? So from your privileged outlook, it just seems like religion is very irrelevant to you. Because again, the instant gratification is not there and things of that sort. And I've never really lived a dark life. Now, once you jump ship and you leave the religion and you go into that dark life, what does Shaitan tell you? You can't go back now. You can't go back. Right? So it's a very interesting issue here, and that's why, in conclusion, that's why Herakl said that when faith enters the heart, a person will never abandon that faith out of being displeased with it. A person might leave Islam because they were not intellectually prepared. A person might leave Islam because they had really serious family issues, or they were just they put their faith, or they turned a sheikh into their faith, and the sheikh went astray, and they said, okay, I don't know what the religion is anymore. So they really associate that religion with people, and the people became corrupt, so they stopped believing in that faith. A person might leave Islam because they converted and they were treated like second-class citizens. They encountered racism and things of that sort. But a person won't leave Islam because of Islam, right? After having immersed themselves in it. And that's really the point here. And even if there are exceptions to that rule, it's not the norm. And I can see all of you nodding your heads because you're probably thinking about people that have left the religion, and it almost never fits that criteria. A person that really came in, immersed themselves into it, and didn't have all those other factors to pull them out. Okay? So they might leave, but it would be something else that would cause them to leave. And inshallah ta'ala, we're going to go ahead and stop there. So the idea here is that even though Islam, just a beautiful comment from Ibn Hajar rahimahullah ta'ala, even though Islam brought, just think about what it brought them. It brought them new restrictions in life that they didn't have before that. So, who's happy with restrictions in life? Like, who's told by their parents, you can't do this, and that, and go, yes. Doesn't make sense. So these people have all sorts of restrictions in their lives after having lived a life of no restriction, and they're happier with those restrictions present. These people live lives of honor, and now they were living lives of persecution, and they're happier in those lives of persecution because faith entered their hearts, and that was a sign of the quality of the faith and the quality of the heart that received that faith. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us a certain quality of heart to where we can embrace the faith fully, and we connect our hearts to our Creator, fully embracing Him with it, not having expectations of Him in this world, but instead expecting of Him the best of the hereafter, and that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will bless us with that which He's given us in this dunya as well. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow Iman to enter our hearts, and to enter our eyes, and to enter our minds, and to enter our tongues, and to enter our actions. That all of our actions be dictated through faith as it was taught to us by the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows us to live and die upon that faith. Allahumma ameen. Questions? Yeah.
Sheikh, doesn't Herakl later on call people to Islam or to believe in Him, but he never actually does himself?
Herakl embraces a pluralistic doctrine of Christianity towards the end of his life. Which means Herakl basically goes non-denominational. But internally, there is sufficient evidence of his admiration for Islam and his actual belief in it, but fearing what would happen to him if he publicly announced that. So what's publicly known of Herakl, whose name was Qaisar, Herakl was the title, so his name was actually Qaisar, was that historically, if you study him, he embraced like a non-denom, which was considered, to be like kufr to them, a form of disbelief to them. He embraced, like in all doctrines are welcome type of Christianity, sort of a non-denominational Christianity. That became his public stance. I plan to do a lecture on Herakl. He's fascinating. I mean, there's interaction between him and the Prophet ﷺ, the companions, Abu Bakr, Omar, very significant interactions, and his life story is quite fascinating. So inshallah ta'ala, I plan to do like an actual study of him, inshallah ta'ala. Yes? Actually, should we go on? Any sisters? Yeah, sorry.
I'm not sure how clear I can be on this, but the third point you made, that the reason people leave the religion being that they have not seen the dark life or experienced it, and it seems tempting to them or seems glamorous to them. As a parent, how do we balance that with sheltering our children or protecting them from the evil of this world?
That is a really, really good question. And my oldest child is 6. So I'm not going to act like I've been through this, and I've tested it on my own teenage children, right? But the question is, so how do we, bringing up the point where Umar radiallahu anhu mentions a person who never really experienced darkness, so how do we let our children sort of find that balance, right? Or find that balance with proper exposure and proper censorship. Now, it's a balance, and it's not a black and white answer, but what I would say is that it's important to teach your children to be confident and that when they're going to be exposed to the inevitable, they know how to confront it. They know why what they have is better. So sometimes, I mean, I can tell you that I think it's a very powerful experience for Muslim youth, for example, to hear the revert stories, to see that person that lived that life of glamour and came over to Islam or came over to faith and gave that all up. Like, it's actually very powerful for them. Absolute censorship doesn't work, because it's like you're allowing them to see faith as a burden their entire lives, as opposed to a gift. So there's already a sense of insecurity. There's already a sense of isolation. An isolationist mentality as Muslims within this country is very unhealthy. You know, like, let's isolate ourselves. Let's just try to keep ourselves away from everything. Don't interact with people because you're going to see this and you're going to see that. No. So there should be a level of confidence instilled, and too much censorship can be a problem. Now, that never becomes an excuse to expose someone to haram. Okay? So you should not be the reason why a person is exposed to haram, a person is exposed to something that's forbidden. Right? So it's not like, okay, I'm going to let you watch this, you know, so that you can see how bad this really is. Right? But when a child or when a person ventures into just becoming aware of the elements of society that are around them, instead of slapping them on the wrist and saying, Astaghfirullah, come back over here, I can't believe you did that, you have to really, really have a sit down with them and explain things to them and kind of go through things with them, inshallah ta'ala. So it's a vague answer because it's kind of a broad question, so it's sort of a broad answer, but it is a balance that you have to find. So don't push your kid to sin, right, or expose them to that intentionally, but at the same time, you know, they've got to grow their own wings, right? So, Allah. Yeah.
Who was that king that he called all the priests into the cabinet and he closed the door and he told
That's Hiraql. What you're asking me is Hiraql. This is the same person.
And there was early stages of the Islam. There was one captive, then he entered into Islam, then he became Murtad, and he went with Makkah. Who was that person?
Ubaydullah ibn Jahsh. Ubaydullah ibn Jahsh. But Ubaydullah ibn Jahsh is the exception. Again, what Hiraql is asking Abu Sufyan is about the norm, not the exception. Yeah.
You talk about the different reasons why people leave the faith, which kind of comes from the different reasons why they answered it to begin with. When we see it as like a stepping stool almost, because even we see like in the dawah of like Prophet and other Anbiya, when they're initially giving the message, they talk about, right, and they also, you know, like, so can we say that this is like an entering point, but then it should evolve, or we just say like, nah, really bring that up?
Okay, so what you're mentioning here is, you know, do we use other things as a stepping stone to bring someone into the faith? So for example, to a lot of people, the brotherhood is what appeals to them. The sense of unity, the sense of belonging. They're not necessarily embracing all aspects of the faith yet. They're just sort of coming into it. Can that be a stepping stone? Yes, it can be. It can be. So the only time it becomes a problem is when the person's like a hypocrite. They're doing it to gain those benefits in this dunya, and they have no intention of really immersing themselves in the faith at any point. And that's something you can't tell as a da'i.
So for dawah purposes, you can like present Islam as a solution to your current problem.
You can present it as a solution to your current problems. Not that life is going to get amazing, but that your perspective on life will make your life necessarily better, will improve the quality of your life. There is no promise that when you become Muslim, certain things are going to happen for you in this world. But what it will do is that it will increase the quality of your perspective, which will, by default, by extension, increase the quality of your life. All right, last question. Any sisters? No? Brothers? Yeah.
So as a convert, and my son being 3, my wife being a convert, and being an immigrant as well, came from Brazil when I was 9, how do we prepare our children to be intellectually confident? Because one thing I don't like, and I'm not trying to offend anybody, because I'm an immigrant too, okay? My son's first generation. I find that through some of the communities I've gone, people not based on what people have told me and try to project their culture on me. I am who I am, and I realize that I'm not here to please a human being. Someone doesn't like how I look because I don't look like your culture perspective of where you came from. I'm sorry, but then how do we instill that confidence? Because I still hear many times again people say, you know, it's like they're trying to say, if I'm an American, I'm a Muslim, those things don't go together. It's sad. So then how do we, which our children are being born in this country, how do we get them ready to get that level of intellectual confidence?
Okay, so it's sort of a bundle, but like, you know, how do you teach your children confidence in the faith in the presence of culture which has, you know, infiltrated in sometimes to where it's presented as faith? There are a few, it's a multifaceted answer. The first answer to that question is that not all culture is bad. There's culture that contradicts with the religion, which is a problem. There are cultural practices that become part of the creed, which is innovation, bid'ah. And then there are cultural practices that are subjective, whether they're good, whether they're bad, or so on and so forth. And there are things that there are some very positive aspects of culture. So those aspects of culture, we should maintain them within our own practices, but we don't turn them into faith, if that makes sense. So it's a good cultural practice, but it's not faith, right? So, but part of good adab and part of good etiquette and part of good faith is upholding the positive aspects of culture, not throwing it all out. Okay? Now, what you're mentioning, I'm assuming, is the negative aspects of culture, just this total package that I inherit as a child growing up, and I can't even distinguish between culture and Islam. So I say that, you know, what I would say is that how do you grow that intellectual confidence? Number one, you yourself have to grow intellectually. If you're going to teach your kids, you need to be in a position to teach your kids. Because when your kids come to you and they ask you those difficult questions about religion, you can't always say, okay, well, we'll talk to the sheikh tomorrow. Because then they'll say, well, why are you still Muslim, right? Why are you a Muslim if you don't even know the answer to this, right? So you actually have to equip yourself, and that's becoming more and more a necessity with the times that we're living in. The second thing here is that you need to make that distinction to them if you are in that situation where, just to understand you correctly, are you the parent that's teaching your children that bundle, or are you the parent that's bringing the kid to the masjid and the kid seeing the bundle from other people? You understand what I'm saying? Are you the parent with the bundle, or is someone else?
No, I think my wife being a convert too is just, you know, sometimes we come in and we feel that, and like I said, I'm an anthropologist by trade. I love cultures and languages, so it's just, I want my sons to understand that yes, you're an American, you're a Muslim, and like we were saying, you know, there's nothing wrong with that. We take the good and we leave the bad. So I mean, both my wife and I are responsible of trying to. He's only 3.
So the conflict of identity, which you're talking about, is that, you know, can you be a good American, a good Muslim? Like, is there a conflict in identity and that type of stuff? That will obviously come from, you know, by and large, from maybe, you know, a first generation, second generation type deal. That will go away naturally. It already is going away, because most American-born Muslims don't feel that conflict between their cultural identity and their religion. And it's really interesting because the similarity, and I always tell people this, especially when it comes to marriage. I am a proponent of interracial marriage. I believe the Prophet ﷺ actively sought it. That a Desi American, like a Pakistani American Muslim, is probably more similar to a Palestinian American Muslim than a Pakistani American Muslim is to a Pakistani Muslim, or a Palestinian American Muslim is to a Palestinian Muslim. The similarity, we've kind of been forced to kind of make our own culture in a way. It's not all good, but it's there, right? There's similarities and things of that sort, the references and so on and so forth. So I think the identity crisis is solved with second, third generation, with the development of generations. Like, I don't think, you know, African American Muslims, who are the largest population of Muslims in this country, have that conflict. Like, I don't think any of them view, or for, you know, any significant population of them view their culture being at odds with their religion. In fact, they've embraced the two usually quite well together. Allah. All right, Jazakumullah khair. Inshallah ta'ala, we'll see you guys next week. Actually, wait, I won't see you next week. So next week is my spring break. I'm going to be visiting